couple of sessions will be on CKA, passing the exam. So let me share my screen for a second just to go over the CNCF stuff, and then I'll pass it to Chad and do the introduction. 1 second. I think it's this one. I'm sharing now, right?
Yep, I can see.
Yeah, people can put their names in here as attendees. That's something that we do in CNCF. Some people like to do it, some people don't. You can also put your company name if you want in there. This is just in case your manager or boss ask if you're doing community work or you're joining the community and things like that. You can say, "Hey, look my name in this."
That's a great evidence.
And just
for
us,
Friday evening beers and reading.
Yeah, and as for networking, right? It's that like the whiteboard thing. Also, feel free to put like looking for a job or hiring DevOps and Kubernetes people. That's also good. So just to kick off this series, this is the book club. We meet every Friday. We have another series. We meet Thursdays in a different time zone, which the people in the US East Coast can attend. It's on Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. This one is on Fridays, 1 p.m. Eastern. So we have two series of the book club. We follow the code of conduct of the CNCF. This is an official community chapter now under the CNCF, and we get resources from the CNCF like this subscription to BV to record this and get together here, and then we'll be asking them to give us vouchers and things like that. I think we have a voucher. I don't know if Eric or somebody had it. We have a voucher that we can share for a CKA exam or training. And then we also have the voucher for the book that we're going to read today and the next couple of weeks. As a introduction, if you have not been here, I'm Carlos Santana. I'm the organizer. I'm a Kubernetes nerd, work for AWS. And then we also have other folks moderating, Eric Manning from Sneak, Sevi from Container Solutions, and Chad from Raft. And just wanted to do this quickly. I think the news that we have on news is KCD Texas is October 6th. There's tickets available. Actually, there's a recent discount. Please, if you're in Texas.
Yeah, we have an update.
Sorry, I was gonna say something to you before the meeting, Carlos, and I didn't.
Is it not happening or being scheduled?
Yeah, my bad. I should have mentioned it too, but we literally just decided yesterday, and we've been scrambling to reach out to our speakers and our sponsors. But yes, we sadly had to make the decision yesterday to cancel KCD Texas. Super sad. Obviously, we didn't want to do this, but we just didn't get the attendance that we wanted. And, I think it comes down to a lot of different reasons, macroeconomic reasons, especially related to the tech sector, all the layoffs that are going on. And also, we're still not seeing pre-pandemic levels of attendance in any meetups, regardless, across the board. So, yeah, sad news, but that is the case.
Okay, sad to listen to that. But for folks joining, if you join the Slack, I'll paste the latest KCDs. There's KCDs around the world happening. Another conference. I'm speaking. My next conference is All Things Open. So if you live in North Carolina, or you can attend North Carolina, October 16 and 17, I think, All Things Open. I'll be giving a talk there on OPA, Gatekeeper, Kernel for crossplane. So with that, if people can get the vouchers, if not, I'll get it there. But I'll pass it to Chad. Chad is going to be our host, and Eric and Sevi is going to do some hosting in a couple of weeks. And the focus for this series is CKA. So see how many people we get to pass the CKA this fall, and also challenge. I need to do it. If people are debating or how to get use the voucher that we have for the CKA, buy the exam, and just schedule it. I think that's the best strategy. Just schedule it, because then you can change it. You have a year to take it, so you can schedule it, let's say, for December if you're in the holidays, and schedule it on a Friday or Saturday. I don't know. And then I'll take a screenshot if you want to share it, that you schedule it, that you're like committed to take it that date. If not, you can change it, but at least you have a milestone to take the exam this year in 2023 and get it. So I'll do the same, because I think I need to renew. I think I took the same as Eric, so I'm due this year.
Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to share, the platform is very painful. Last time when I failed, I pretty much struggled with the timing because of the platform. At some point, can we touch that as well? Like, can we get some information about it?
The new one, the desktop view VNC
exactly.
thing.
It is indeed super painful.
Yeah, Chad will have. I haven't taken that version yet, but I'll pass it to Chad to kick it off. Go ahead, Eric.
I have comments when we get to that.
Eric took it recently, right? Also.
I just renewed a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Nice.
We'll capture some notes, me and Chad, and bring it to the training folks. Okay.
Carlos, in chat, Thomas or Tomas, I guess it's Thomas, is saying he can't add his name to the document. He's got a read-only access.
They can suggest, like anyone can, like if you don't see it at the top, you can switch it to suggesting maybe, and then just put it there, and then Eric just puts the checkbox of accepting. If not, refresh and switch to suggest, and then we just click the accept. If not, we can put it, we can copy it, paste it like from the chat. That's not a problem.
Yeah. Maybe.
So I'll stop sharing and I pass it to Chad, because I as experience, the 1 hour like goes very super fast, and and usually I like to talk a lot, which is I think the major problem, but that's okay, I guess. So go ahead, Chad. If you can share the screen, I think you should be able to do it.
Yeah. I'm a little disappointed that you're not wearing our shirt today, Carlos. But
next time.
Oh my god!
I thought we were going to be twins.
That's
today.
The thing now.
How did I not get one of those? I saw you.
I'm just so jealous.
I totally forgot.
It's okay.
Not a problem.
Nice to meet you, Chad, by the way. Great to have you here.
Nice to meet you too. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So this is a bittersweet day for me, actually, because the whole KCD Texas thing. But yesterday I just received this in the mail.
Ooh.
So we now have the official, hard copy, and the ink's all dried and it's all there. So this is super exciting to share this with you, and I also want to share with you a discount code that Manning just gave me, my publisher, for 45% off if you want to get the print version. I know a lot of you already have the ebook version, but the code to get that discount, and I'll put it in the chat as well, is just PB, P as in Paul, B as in boy, and then my last name, which is Crowell, Crowell. So you can use that code at checkout at Manning, and you just go to acingthecka.com as in the t-shirt. I think it might be backwards, but anyways, acingthecka.com, and then you can use the code PB Crowell to get 45% off. So yeah, I'm so happy. This is years in the making. Literally, I'm so proud of this, and I put my heart and soul into it. There's over 70 exercises to go through, and as we'll get to in the chapters, the exercises and the scenarios that are built in this book that are built out for you will be the determining factor whether you're ready or not. So let me pause there, and I'll share my screen. Let's see, share screen, and then Let's do the entire window, YOLO. Oh, all right. So as I said before, we can go to acingthecka.com. And, you know, I don't work for Manning or anything, but I think taking a look at the Livebook feature, which is their kind of equivalent to, like, if you go to O'Reilly and you can view the books in the browser, right? So it's their equivalent, and it deserves some attention, I think. And again, I don't be skin in the game, so I'm not going to try to sell you on it, but I do think there's a couple things that I'd like to point out here. So if you can't see my screen, let me know, but I'm going to assume that you can. If you open the book in live, it's called Livebook, and if you just if you just were watching, you can click on the little picture of the cover, and then when it comes up in preview, you can, down at the bottom here, just click on Read in Livebook, and it'll open up in a new tab. So a couple things to point out here. One is that you can highlight. So you can highlight text, and then after you highlight all of your text at the end of the book, let's say, you can go here into resources and so reading options, I think it is. And then I should have, you can view all of your highlights here somewhere, maybe pointing out some of the bugs in this, but oh, notebook. Okay. Yeah, notebook. So you can click on notebook and go to all notebooks. And the notebook is your notes, essentially. It doesn't, okay. So notebook, that's the first thing I want to point out. Second thing is the discussion, right? So whenever you highlight something, you can click on this little word bubble, right? And start a discussion. So you can create a post. This post actually, believe it or not, goes directly to me. I get an email. It says a comment's been made on your book. We can have a chat back and forth. So I can reply to your comment, and we can address whatever concern you have or whatever question or comment you choose to put in there. And then you can see all the discussions with other folks. If you just see how it says 16 here, so you can click on this and you can find out all the other comments that everyone else has made. And so in just this first chapter, there's 16. That's including my replies and everything. But just a easy way to get updated on what other people are having troubles with, and maybe your questions are answered in here, and also you can start a thread and ask your own questions. All right, that's all I wanted to point out regarding the Livebook. There is a nice little outline here in the left-hand side, which makes it a little bit easier to navigate. So I can kind of, go from chapter to chapter, from section to section very easily. All right, so the first chapter is the first steps, and this is getting introduced to the exam. And at the very beginning of this chapter, I put in a note about what is a Kubernetes administrator, right? Because I think somebody just approaching this book is like, okay, first of all, why do I need to take this exam? What is it going to get me? Does it really matter? And also, is it really worthy to give me that job or promotion or whatever it may be? And so I make the case for that here, and really go over what is consisted of a Kubernetes administrator. So I have a, I'll get to where I list out an actual job description. But I just thought that was important to mention for this first chapter, and just approaching this book and just starting reading. So here we go with the PSI. PSI is a testing center that you'll be taking your exam through. The only option is to take your exam at home, which is interesting. So you can't go to a testing center. The only option is for you to dedicate some space at your house or in your office, hopefully, and clear your desk, clear your area, and the proctor will check for this and be able to sit and take the exam for that 2-hour time frame. There was mention of the PSI bridge, it's called, and the PSI bridge is this remote desktop environment, which is an Ubuntu XFCE. I'll highlight that type desktop, right? So it's most similar to GNOME in that you have this Debian-based Linux system that you are going to be dropped into when you start the exam, and you, as a result, should know how to open up the terminal and also open up the provided browser. The provided browser is Mozilla. So being comfortable with using Mozilla in terms of, hitting Control F to find within the page, which is helpful, because you can have an additional tab open with while you're taking the exam. So while you're taking the exam, and I encourage you to do this, you open up the browser and go to kubernetes.io/docs. That is the only provided or the only allowed domain to go to, including the /docs. So do not navigate beyond that. I actually tried to navigate beyond that at one time, and it actually is firewalled, so I wasn't able to get to the page. So I wouldn't worry so much about navigating away because you won't be there's no penalty for it. But I would be cognizant of just staying on the documentation at the very least for the time's sake, right? So I have heard of people having problems with the PSI bridge, and it comes down to that kind of laggy experience when operating in that remote desktop environment. So you might experience some delays with copying and pasting. You might experience some delays even when typing. So typing, you might, which is very annoying, right? So just be mindful of that. I do think that there is some wiggle room in terms of, if it is causing a problem, they will refund your. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't work for PSI or Linux Foundation, so I shouldn't say that. I think you can make a case, is what I'm trying to say. I'll go ahead.
No, like if you have problems on anything like that, like bring it up, because like the Linux Foundation and people running like in charge of the exams, like they will vouch for you if it's something legit, right? So
yeah, I will say that they're aware of the problem at the very least.
Yeah,
and so they're making moves to correct it.
On this light, so if you had a question about or a suggestion or complaint or whatever for the certification folks, not PSI, but the Linux Foundation certification people, what's the best avenue to communicate that? I actually yesterday put in something in the certifications channel in CNCF. I'm not sure that that's really the best place to do it, though.
All right, so what you do is you go to Google and you type in CKA exam. You go to the, not the Linux Foundation link, but the CNCF link.
Yeah.
You scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I thought it was at the very bottom, but I know it's in the handbook. So you click on candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So candidate handbook, you can go in here, and they have they have in a section here, and sorry, I didn't have this bookmarked per se, but
that's okay. I can find it. Sort of feedback.
I think it's in the book. I think I saw it.
Yeah, so I can search help. So maybe it's at the bottom of this page. So yeah, here we go. I don't know, that's the FAQ for PSI.
Well, if you happen to talk to anybody, I think it would be great if they'd offer in-person certifications at KubeCon or other large CNCF events or LF events. Like so that we don't have to deal with it. Because my biggest complaint was having to prep my office for, and we'll get into that, I think, when you get into this chapter. But it took me a half hour with the proctor to get my office acceptable after I had tarped off everything in my office.
Yeah.
And as a DevRel, that's hard because I got cameras and lights and multiple computers and monitors and
you put everything like that.
Yeah, you just.
I think you did that last time, right?
I've had to do this several times. Yeah.
Can I share one more thing? I was not aware of this. So my kid was sleeping in my office / bedroom. So I tried to take one exam, probably Terraform Associate, in the biggest room, which looks like a shared space. So they are not okay if this place looks like a shared space, even though there was no one else in my apartment. I couldn't let the proctor get me in the exam and had to reschedule it, which took me ages, unfortunately.
Yep.
So be careful, like you really need it, like close, defined space. Like they can't accept big rooms for some reason.
Yeah, that's good to be aware of. I posted the link in the chat, but I did end up finding it. And so what you have to do is you can actually see my my requests here from previous exams.
Yeah.
But you have to open up a Jira ticket, and I think they're pretty. I don't know, like 48 hours. I think was the average response time that I got. But
Bala's got a great point in chat. Just to read it says, not recommending to use Office laptop as there are some settings in your laptop that could make VM crash. So yeah, they want you to use the PSI browser, right?
Yep.
And if you can't install things, that could be a problem, right?
Definitely, yeah. There's a system check that you can go through.
Yeah, definitely do that.
Definitely do that.
It's a good point, Bala. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, so I would, I would, like I said, go just Google CKA exam, click on the CNCF link, and scroll to the bottom and check out the handbook. Read through all the information that pertains to the CKA exam. The CKA exam is very similar to the CKAD exam, so most of the information is kind of grouped together. Another thing I want to point out on the CNCF page, if you scroll down to the bottom, is the curriculum overview. So this is the curriculum, which is what will be on the exam, right? And so in the book, I followed this very closely, probably too closely, but I just wanted to draw that correlation there between what we're talking about in the book to what's actually on this curriculum guide. So in the book, I actually, and we'll get to this in, I think, chapter 3. So we'll talk about it next week. But
that PDF is important, at least for depending if you're watching this in the future from YouTube. Double check what is the version and what is the percentages in here. This GitHub repo keeps updating it. When they make the 128, they will update this GitHub repo, and you will see the new information here. And then which version? Like a lot of people ask, like it's 128 is GA in Kubernetes, but it's not the exam. So you're going to need to study for 127 or practice for 127, like in this example today.
Yeah, good point. While you were saying that, it reminded me of something that I wrote down here, and I just want to share this with folks. So some additional grading information. This is as a result of me messaging the folks at the Linux Foundation. So the CKA exam is graded for outcome only, which means there could be many different paths to achieve the same result, right? And there is partial credit. So, just because you didn't complete the task completely. Doesn't mean that you marked off for that entire task. So I say that in a lot more words in these following paragraphs. So exam items are also set up to be independent from one another. As long as the candidate does exactly what the question asked, there would be no dependencies or conflicts. Here, let me just post this in the chat so you can read it on your own.
Yep.
As opposed to me having to read to you. And so I just wanted to notate, because you mentioned the versions, right? So this is a little bit old, but the CKA exam is currently on 1.27 of Kubernetes. The removal of Docker shim, not relevant at this point because this was in the past. But just know that the container runtime is now containerd, and you can view the container runtime with the kubectl get nodes o-wide, and so over here at the very right, you can see that containerd is used. The exams are upgraded to the latest version of K8s within 4 to 6 weeks of the version being released. So, just be mindful of that for 1.28. I think how long has 1.28 been out for?
I think in a month and a half, I think.
Yeah, so you can count on the exam being updated 4 to 6 weeks after that. All right, so back to the book. Just introducing this exam environment and the exam itself. So another key thing to point out, 66 or higher is the score that you'll have to get to pass the exam. So we'll go through some tips and tricks to shave off some time. It's 2 hours, but that 2 hours is going to go by really fast, believe me. So we'll talk about doing some shortcuts like, taking advantage of the alias that's already provided in the exam environment, and also using autocomplete, using the dry run, stuff like that, which will save you some time. The CKA exam is provided by Linux Foundation. I think we all knew that. But the cost is $375 US. I think it's still $375, right? Maybe it's $395 actually. $395. Okay, okay. I'm not going to waste any more time on that. So it's $395. Yeah, so these are the tabs that you can have open. I said that you can have an additional tab, just one tab open during the exam. So these are the tabs that you can have open. You can have the Helm docs open. You can have Kubernetes docs open. You can have the Kubernetes GitHub page open, and then also the Kubernetes blog. Just one tab. You can go to each one of those individually using that one additional tab. All right, so you'll need a computer. The system requirements, which are also in the handbook. So you need a computer running Windows 8.1, 10, 11, macOS 10.15, so on and so forth. You can read. And you need a webcam with at least 640 by 480 pixels. And a computer screen must be at least 1368 by 769 right here. So that is a requirement, right? Because they're going to have to keep an eye on you, or that's the expectation, is that they are watching you during the exam, the proctor, and they're going to be they're going to have to see you. And occasionally they may ask you to hold up your hands, so just be mindful of that. I've had that happen before. So they'll just stop you, and this is very annoying, especially if you're in the middle of a task. But they'll ask you, please raise your hand, and they'll check your wrists just to make sure you haven't, written anything or done anything with your hands. So, all right. So you'll have to verify your identity. So make sure you have a government issued ID, and your workspace will be scanned. So I guess this is the point to say, have a completely clear desk, or as much as you can. So I have a monitor attached to my desk. So for me, they allowed that. They had to see that the monitor was unplugged, however, but they were fine with that, as long as I showed them that, you know, this is the plug, it's unplugged. Besides that, there should be nothing on your desk. And for me, I just had my laptop, and that's it. That's pretty much it. I don't even think you're allowed water, or maybe you are allowed a water bottle, but that's about it.
If it's transparent, the bottle, they're allowing it.
Yep. You have to take the label off of it if it's got a...
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty strict overall. So I'd just be mindful of that and make sure you have a clear space. Or it helps to know somebody who has a clear space or something, but not all of us do. But
yeah, I had to cover up my attached monitors last time I did it, and also I have a Thunderbolt USB dock, and it was, the light on it was on, and they could see it, and I had to get my camera right down in there so they could make sure that it was kosher. So a couple in chat, we have a couple questions that have come up. There's some questions about, can you see the percentage you got? I know they do tell you what percentage you got somewhere, but I was looking at my emails and I can't find it.
At the end of the exam, I think last time when I took
Right at the end of the exam, I think they show you, right?
They have like 24 hours to grade it.
Yeah, they don't show you
right.
how many you got right at the end. Yeah, you'll have to wait at least 24 hours.
That's true. I remember seeing which topics
in the corner.
Failed,
I know it was a very little number in the corner or something in some website or email. I don't remember.
Yeah, they tell you once. It's not on your certificate.
No.
I know because I remember the first time I did the CKA, I did awesome, but I had like 98. I was like, what did I miss? They won't tell you what you missed.
No.
You passed. Don't worry.
Yeah, but what?
Don't worry.
There's another question here about webcams. Can you use both a webcam? Oh, good. Bala is answering. Better go with a built-in cam. If you don't have an external webcam, it's very difficult to show your whole room, because when I do it, I'm at a desktop. My laptop is clamshell shut, and I can't use this SLR type camera for it. I have like a Logitech, and they actually have you show your whole room, your ceiling, your floor, under your desk, under your keyboard, all those things. And if you're using your built-in laptop webcam, I guess you could do that, but you're going to be like moving your whole laptop around to show things.
I've done it like that also.
Have you?
Yeah, that's how I did it. That's how I did it, is picked up my laptop. It was, you know, I have a big laptop, so it was hard to maneuver, but it did the job. Are those all the questions?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Just time check.
Yep, we're running a little bit behind. Sorry. So let's go over this really quick. So I just showed you this on the other page, right? So the curriculum, I also included it in the first chapter, just as a reference. Maybe you want to turn back to this page as you're going through the different chapters. So just this matches exactly that curriculum, so you can know that you're on task, and you're actually, you know, working on the stuff that you should be working on for the exam. What's going to be on the exam. So, all right. So this is a little bit about the alias. So there's an alias for kubectl, so you don't have to keep typing kubectl, or kubeclt is what I always typo it as. And these are the clusters that are used. So you with every task that you'll be given on the exam, you'll have to switch your context to one of these different clusters. And so this iCates one kind of gives a hint as to what kind of task it will be. Most likely it'll be related to it'll be CNI related, or it'll be kubelet related. So that's helpful there. But you will be given the context command, which is very important also. So you don't necessarily have to remember the kubectl context command in order, before taking the exam, because it will be provided to you. So you can copy and paste is what I would suggest doing for each task.
Is it always
regardless
the same clusters?
So these are the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I guess I never really.
6.
I didn't. I figured it would be random, that they might give you some more or less.
Good point. I think maybe depending on what tasks you get. So yeah, perhaps you won't have to change your context to each one of these individually, all of them, but you may have you may have a random. Yeah, good point. I didn't think of that. So regardless, they'll tell you which one to switch to, and you can switch to it, and that'll be that. So
yeah, I would point on that. For all of the CK exams do the same kind of a thing. Every question has set your context this way. I copy and paste that religiously every time I go into a question, because even if I'm returning, because you'll be popping around back and forth, and it's very easy to accidentally start looking at the wrong context.
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend just copying and pasting that context command regardless, because it proves that you are, have your scope set and you're working on the right task. Because the worst feeling is like completing a task and then being like, oh man, did I switch? Did I switch my context?
Not only did you do it in the wrong place, but did I mess up every other question that used that context?
Exactly. I had one that had you changing the API, and then because I changed something with the manifest, the Kube API manifest, I couldn't reach the API with the kubectl commands. I ended up using the cryctl, which we'll get to as well. But yeah, that was a bit of I kind of panicked. But anyway, yeah, so if you're, so we'll move on from that. So if you're just approaching topics of Kubernetes, having never heard before, go ahead and schedule your exam. So this is a little bit about like the question that I always get is, if I have never touched Kubernetes before, should I take this exam? And the official answer is probably not. Everybody has to study for a certain amount of time, right? So I would recommend studying, even if you're proficient, for at least a month. But that kind of sliding scale depends on whether you have familiarity with, how containers work, how the Linux operating system works, and also what Kubernetes, what problem that solves, right? So why we need to orchestrate our containers in the first place. So I usually say, if you're interested in this exam and you're willing to put in the time and let's say you've been working with Docker every day in your day-to-day at your job, but you really want to take this exam and you're willing to put in the time and effort, and you study for at least 3 months. And I think that maybe a little bit optimistic, a little bit biased maybe, but I think that you can do it. Others, like I said, the official guidance is to, have some real world experience and have that familiarity with containers and Linux and all that. But I really want to encourage you, if you are that set on taking this exam, to not shy away. All right, so I encourage you to, like Carlos said at the beginning of this meeting, I encourage you to schedule your exam now. A couple of reasons for that. One is because it gives you a deadline, right? It gives you something to shoot for, and it also kind of innately creates this discipline, the discipline that's required to put in the day-to-day work, which I highly recommend. just to get that muscle memory, that practice, and get in the reps to actually pass this exam. And it's gonna take that type of discipline, that self-discipline, and hopefully through this book club we can have some, accountability buddies. Yep. But it is gonna take some dedication, and so scheduling your exam does that. And also, you have a free retake with this exam, which is very important to remember, because it takes some pressure off, right? Because if you don't pass it the first time, it's okay. You can reschedule. And, on that second time around, most likely you will pass. So you do have a free retake. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And more reason to schedule your exam now and delay any fear that you may have. All right, so moving on to what's in store for this book. So throughout this book, I use Kind as a local Kubernetes cluster. So Kind stands for Kubernetes and Docker. So really the only requirement is Docker. You might be asking, why don't you just use Kubernetes that comes with Docker, Docker Desktop, right? Mm. And the reason is because with Kind, we can actually achieve a multiple node cluster, whereas with the Kubernetes that comes with Docker Desktop, you can only have one node. So that's the reason why we use Kind.
Also the version, I think I remember Docker Desktop having a specific version of
it's
Kubernetes.
Meant to be a developer help tool. It's not really meant to be a full-on Kubernetes environment for this kind of thing. For instance, you have no CNI in that you can control in Docker Desktop Kubernetes.
Yeah,
they've got their own. It's a nice CNI. It does auto load balancing things, whatever. But it's not a. I call Kind a full kubeadm compliance cluster in a container or in.
Yeah, the same thing with Minikube, but I think Kind is lighter weight, so just stick with Kind.
That's a good point as well, as kubeadm is used on the exam. Mm-hmm. So being that Kind is kubeadm, it's going to be you have some familiarity there. So it's better preparation.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to skip ahead. But I do have one other question. Getting through this chapter, I noticed you didn't mention anything about in study prep doing the old school Kubernetes the hard way, setting up your own cluster. Is that valuable anymore nowadays?
For the exam?
I don't think so. This may be controversial, but I get this question all the time. Should I go through Kubernetes the hard way? Should I set up my own, cluster from scratch? Should I set up my own home lab? And for the purposes of the exam, I would say no. Mm. It wastes a lot of time. So for somebody like me who likes to nerd out on that stuff, I will waste a lot of time with, getting my switch configured, getting, my NUC all set, and, all these things that are distractions really from the exam. So I always usually, and for time's sake, I usually say, don't do the Kubernetes the hard way, save that for later, and really focus on what's really important for this exam, which is getting into the kubectl command line, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So really focus on getting these reps in versus, working on the, the operations side of it. And Kind solves all of the possible arguments to that, such as, working with kubelet, kubeadm, and all that. So there's really, I haven't heard a good argument for, really requiring to do that.
Closing a VI properly apparently is a skill Bala thinks we need to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just some familiarity with them helps, and I guess you could get complicated with using tmux and all that, but I also wouldn't recommend, unless you're well versed, a simple set paste, what is it? Y and P for yank and paste, and just being able to use J and K to go up and down the file should be good enough for this exam.
I don't think we're going to get to chapter 2 today, so I'm asking questions now. Sure. one thing I didn't see, and I'm wondering if later it's coming in later in the book. I don't want to give away anything that's coming up. Is there any discussion around time management as you go through the test? Coming.
Yeah, I actually touch on time management quite a lot.
Okay, cool.
In that I encourage folks to use those shortcuts that I mentioned before, and there's a couple other ones in addition to using the alias, autocomplete, dry run, etc.
Very cool.
Set paste, yeah, all types of tips, and they'll be separated into their own block, kind of like what you see here, live book features settings. It'll be a block like that that'll say exam tip in bold letters, and we'll give you those time-saving tips.
Very cool, because I mean the clock is as much as big a challenge as the content on this exam.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and so let's move forward to meeting Kubernetes. So we're only at 1.3, so yeah, we're not going to get to chapter 2. Sorry, folks. So this is an overview of Kubernetes. So this is in the first chapter, just to kind of set a foundation for like what I expect you to know going into the book. And this is very important just because some of these terms and the jargon that's used is used throughout the book, but also having this fundamental understanding, such as the difference between control plane and worker nodes, or control plane nodes and worker nodes, is very important when you're trying to schedule pods, for example, or just overall work with either the control plane components or anything really. So very important to go through this as a foundation. And for some of you review, others may not. And so feel free to skip this if you want. You can always go back to it. But again, just laying a foundation here. I think it's important to point out that Kubernetes is a RESTful API, and through that we access the API via kubes. When we're using the kubectl CLI, and we're trying to access these things in these API groups, right? So this is a broad overview of like kind of what the API looks like in terms of where that resource identifier for each object in Kubernetes is. And just as a side note, there may be two reference points or two URIs for the same object as depicted in this diagram here. So for example, deployments may be in APIs apps v1, but also maybe in APIs I don't know if that's supposed to be IS. Anyways, they're. Yeah, I think this is a typo.
Yeah, diagram has an issue, a missing IP, so we can write in errata.
Yeah. Okay. But anyways, yeah, just know that this is a RESTful API, and so it's set up much the same if you're familiar with other RESTful APIs, which are very common these days, right? And if you are not familiar with REST APIs, I have something coming in further down, so just hang in there. So like I said, the kubectl CLI uses I said that we were accessing the API via the kubectl CLI, and a way that we're able to authenticate to the API is using something called a kubeconfig. And this is just jargon, kubeconfig, but it is a file that's located in your .kube directory, in your home directory, in a hidden folder .kube, and then it's just called config. We just call it kubeconfig for ease of use. We cover this in greater detail in chapter 3. So if this is not making sense right now, just hang in there for chapter 3 where we cover RBAC. But this is kind of the authentication piece of that. All right, so cluster authentication, installation, and configuration. So this gets into a brief overview of some of the exam curriculum stuff that we looked at over here on the CNCF side. So this is just an overview of kind of what to expect. What does cluster architecture, installation, and configuration mean? So I go through an explanation of that. I'm going to skip over that for now. Same thing with workloads and scheduling. Workloads just mean apps that are deployed on Kubernetes. Scheduling means, scheduling a I guess, for the lack of a better word, putting a pod on a node. That's what we mean by scheduling. And we'll cover this in more detail in coming chapters. Just this is a kind of an introduction and an overview. Like I said before, if you're with REST APIs, you can get familiar with it if you want to by visiting the Star Wars API. Just in your browser, type in swapi.dev. And so it's really cool to see some of those resource locations that we talked about earlier, and get to see how things are structured within a RESTful API. All right, so I do want to point out that sometimes in the book I will call things like pods, deployments, services, I will call them resources, and sometimes I will call them objects. In a lot of cases, I mean the same thing, but I do want to point out that a resource, technically, a resource is that resource and its location within the API. The object is the object itself. So those may be different. Like I said, there may be two resources per object, but that's what I mean by resources and or objects.
I'm thinking you're saying maybe an object is something that you stored in etcd you're referring to, and the resource is the address of how I find that object, or is an object something else?
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Services networking, just services are a way for you to reach out to your individual pods given a DNS name and IP address. And so we'll get to in coming chapters. Storage is just as it sounds, it's those volumes that we store data in. So persistent volumes, persistent volume claims, and storage classes. Troubleshooting is actually it's 30% of the exam, if I'm not mistaken. It's at the very end, 30%, yeah.
And I think. Troubleshooting is I think the part that is the most fun one.
Yeah, exactly. Basically. I was going to say the same. Yeah, it's the most fun part.
Yeah, so I think you'll really like chapter 8, which will be at the very end, of course. But troubleshooting is the most important thing to kind of grasp and understand in terms of Kubernetes. So there's a lot of good practice with troubleshooting and some cool exercises that I think you'll like.
Cool.
All right, so going over the control plane in a little bit more detail. So the control plane is kind of the brains of the operation. It's the essential components to Kubernetes in order for it to operate. Consists of the controller, manager, API server, scheduler, and etcd. And so we go over what each of those means in terms of their function in the API. Or within the control plane node. So I will skip through that really quick. I think it is important to know, but we will cover this in future chapters. So don't worry if you don't know that like the back of your hand like I do. So the important part is to know the difference between the control plane, which contains all those components that I just mentioned, controller, manager, scheduler, etcd, and those components, and then the worker node components. So worker nodes is for the essentially it's where your app's going to be running in Kubernetes, and it's responsible for the workloads. You're placing the workloads on the worker node. You're not necessarily placing your workloads or your apps on the control plane node. And so the worker node doesn't contain those essential control plane components because it's just focused on the work, right? So we have the kubelet, kube proxy, and the container runtime. So those act in communication to the control plane to work together as a single cluster. So that's the important part, just knowing the difference between the control plane and the worker node. So the kubelet as a service, it's going to be, for the exam purposes, it's going to be the only kind of system level service, or the daemon, if you will, on both the control plane and the worker nodes. So the kubelet will run just like any other daemon on a Linux system. So you can access that, get the status of it, stop and start it using the systemctl CLI, which will be available for exam. And so we'll get to this in the troubleshooting section in terms of being able to determine when the kubelet is misconfigured or is stopped or is in an error state. So just that kubelet, just know for now that kubelet is the only Linux system service that's going to be on your nodes. Everything else is running in a pod or in a container on the node. Kubeproxy is running on each worker node as well, including the control plane node. And I have a special kind of shout out to this video from 2017, which I think is still very relevant, which kind of explains the life of a packet. So this kind of goes into detail the packet as it goes from one worker node to the other, which I think is very important, and how the packet is encapsulated via the CNI and is overall just interesting in terms of networking. The kubeproxy service is not necessarily a proxy, even though it has it in the name. It's more or less assigning those IP tables rules to have the packet routed to its correct destination. All right, so the container runtime, I already mentioned this, but it's container D. So I guess the important thing to point out here is that you can use, this is a CRI compliant runtime, so you can use cryctl ps, for example, which I think is one of the trivia items that Carlos posted earlier, in order to get a list of running containers on the host. As opposed to doing Docker PS, so Docker's not going to be, well, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, so cryctl is an option.
There's actually a really good podcast that came out yesterday. The Kubernetes podcast by Google had Phil Estes on, who's the main maintainer for Containerd, and he went into a lot of detail on that. I put a link in the Google Doc to it. It was a great interview.
Nice, I'll check that out. Thank you.
Hey, Chet. Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, thank you for putting this book together. It's very great visuals and a lot of complex things you explain here. I was wondering if you maybe know about, Manning has those live tests, if this your book gonna include this, or maybe you can think maybe it'll be useful to your, about every chapter, at the end of every chapter, you can have a live test to test on all of those things that you just talk about, and kind of to solidify the knowledge.
It's funny that you mentioned that, and I'll try not to go on too much of a tangent here because we are already over on time. But if you go to acingthecka.com/project, there is a live project, CKA exam, hands-on practice. So,
is it kind of the same? Is it a kind of multiple choice test, or this is just a practice test?
This essentially provides you the not so much the lab environment, but just the scenarios that are pertinent to the exam. And I would use this as a supplement to the exercises that are provided in the book. So it's not complete. It just provides a different lens to look through.
No, I'm talking about something different. I don't know if you've seen like other books, like for example, Terraform in Action has, you read a chapter and everything you read about in this chapter, you pick a number of questions that can test you on your knowledge. For example, if you talk about here about control plane, you'll ask all the questions that you just went over, and that's particularly in this chapter, you'll ask you those questions. kind of just solidify the knowledge.
Honestly, I'd never heard of that.
You never seen that? Yeah, just go to any book like the one I've seen is Terraform in Action or Machine Learning. All of those have those live test button on the side. Manning has that, and that's what I like about this Manning. Also, that you can, whatever you read, you can at the end you can test your knowledge and retain better the information.
Okay, great. I'll look into that. Thank you. Okay, so just to finish up here, just want to cover the API model in PKI. PKI stands for Public Key Infrastructure, which is what's used in Kubernetes. Kubernetes has its own certificate authority, so you can actually generate certificates using the CLI, and which we will get to an example of doing that in the next chapter, which we won't be able to cover today. So just know that with every component in Kubernetes, there's a client certificate and a server certificate. I guess, mainly the API has the server certificate, and in which you're kind of trying to authenticate to the API with your client certificate, but also etcd has its own server certificate. So that's really important to know in terms of backing up and restoring etcd, which is also in the next chapter, which we won't be able to get to. So maybe we'll change up the schedule a little bit, because I feel like the next chapter is pretty important. So maybe next week we'll cover the chapter 2 instead. I'm sorry.
Welcome to the Kubernetes Book Club, Chad. This is kind of how it goes. You should have seen our first book. We did Production Kubernetes, which is, this was this big, because we have a lot of good discussions here. So not a bad thing that we only got to chapter 1, honestly.
Cool. Well,
yeah. Also, when we also start, rolling during the sessions, it's really hard to close it in an hour. So we try to be mindful of the time, but yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, a lot to get to. But yeah, if everyone's willing to, kind of pivot and adjust along the way, that's fine too. I think as long as somebody's getting something out of it and helping them for the exam, then I'm all for it.
I have to tell you, Chad, I opened this book this morning. Finally, I read the first 2 chapters this morning, and because you know me, we're always busy. And chapter 1, I expected it to be this light little quick thing that doesn't really go into anything in depth. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most meaty chapter 1 I've ever seen. This is amazing. So I'm really excited about this whole book.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. You should have seen my initial draft. It was twice as long. So that's the story of writing. I think writing a book like this, you kind of get off on tangents, and you kind of it's the process of trimming things down. But I do appreciate you mentioning that.
Anything else we want to cover before we wrap up for the day?
Yeah, just really quickly, Linux system services, declarative syntax, and those are all kind of subsequent things, not necessary for the exam. So I wouldn't harp too much on it. The exam exercises are at the end of the book, and go through those and look forward to maybe sharing some results of that.
Cool. Well, we always have the Slack channel for additional discussions. If there's any other questions, pipe in now. But anyone who's watching the recording, obviously, pop into Slack, continue discussion there. The Google Notes are there as well.
And start practicing already.
Yeah, I mean, that's
get the book and work on it.
Practice is king on these kinds of exams, because it is not like your normal multiple choice where it's like, oh well, I can think about this. It's like, no, you need to know as soon as the question comes up kind of the direction to take, and at least know where in the Kubernetes documentation to find things. So just going through it over and over. I'm interested to see your project, your mock tests that you're showing. With your certification, you get access to the Killer Coda mock tests, which are also very good. So they're good to go through and practice and time yourself practicing them.
Just one question, Chad, though. I know we're running out of time. Oh, we're already out of time. But so I have one is still training on Code Cloud. So it is extremely painful to watch myself. So I never dared. Like after 3 minutes, I had to turn it off every single time. How does it feel to have a look at your own book?
Oh, I think it's somewhere between cringy and some things I'm like, oh man, I'm glad I mentioned that, and then other things I'm like, oh man, I was just saying, this is a process of trimming things down. It's like I most of the time I'm like, I wish I would have left that in, or I wish I would have explained that in more detail. So yeah, it's sometimes good, sometimes bad. So
yeah, a roller coaster of emotions, I can imagine.
A little bit, yeah. It's like my baby, It's it's out into the world now, and I want to protect it.
Thank you for the session. Yes.
Well, I think with that, we're going to wrap.
Right. Yeah. So
thank you,
everyone. See you next week. Thank you for joining us.
See you next week.
See you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.